animator versus the machine.
Begin. All right. So, with artificial intelligence seemingly inserting itself into every industry, we've discussed how it could possibly affect animators to actors to storyboard artists and other people in the animation industry. But animation also has a lengthy history embedded with technology, from Disney creating a division of chemists to make their own paints in the 1930s, to the Xerox era, to more modern day innovations like we can now draw on our screens and animate without paper. Given this deep rooted relationship between animation and technology, it's no surprise that some have connected the two. But what does that mean for schools like Algonquin College that have been teaching animation to generations for over 35 years? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. And who better than the co coordinator and veteran animator, Neil Hunter? Hey, Neil.
Hey, how are you?
Good, you?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Perfect. So, let's tell the Phantom listeners a little about yourself who don't really know who you are.
I imagine that's most of them. I started off in animation. I went to Sheridan in 1981, and I went there because I wanted to do graphic design, like or graphic novels. They were just called comic books back then. And I had seen a couple of people that I liked, and they all had animation experience. And I thought, oh, maybe I should do this. So I went and I applied. And in the hallway, the coordinator flipped through my stuff and went, "Yep, you're in." And I got in like July or something. I wasn't the most organized student, and yeah, I really liked it, and I liked telling stories. I found that that's what I liked doing. I wasn't the best draftsman or drawer or anything like that, so I really liked that. So that was all paper and cells and all that kind of stuff. And the people I was at school with were great, and many of them still working in the industry now. And I think I just started off and I didn't know what to do. So I started a company with a friend and we did some commercials and um, I ended up coming to Ottawa for a 6 month job to work on the raccoons in '86 and I stayed, well, I'm still here. So that was a while. Um, and I got to work on the raccoons, which back, and when I started, you worked from kind of February to September in your animation job, and then you had a job pumping gas or I worked in a studio that was doing commercials that was more year round, but it was hard to find year round work. And back then, animation was just for kids and that kind of stuff, and it was going through some weird phases. So when things like Ren and Stimpy and Beavis and Butthead and The Simpsons all started up in the early '90s, late '80s, that sort of opened the door in North America for adult animation, and um, that lifted everything up a little bit. There was a lot more work. It was a bit of a boom. Disney was back with feature films and that kind of stuff and doing well. So I think I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I just managed to ride that wave. I did a lot of storyboards for studios in California because FedEx started flying into Ottawa, and I could live in Canada and do these storyboards and get an extra 25 cents on the dollar, which was awesome. Um, so I did that, started directing, did a bit of producing and stuff. And um, I was going to go down to California and my dad moved up to Ottawa and I thought, oh, I can't, we haven't lived together in the same city for so many years. Who knows how long I have? He's still alive. Um, and I just decided to stay. And the next day, a friend of mine said they're looking for a full time teacher at the animation program at Algonquin. So I applied and I got in with that. And that was 20 years ago. And I thought I'd do that for 3 years too. So, not very good managing my time, apparently. But so, and then we went from 2 years to a 3 year program. And Paul and I kind of share a brain as far as what we want out of the program and how we wanted people to be treated within the program. And um, we worked very hard with the studios to make sure we have. I think Jefferson at Mercury says, it's a closed circle kind of thing. We're not just dumping students out into the market. but they're coming back and being teachers, or they're coming back and being mentors, and the studios are trying to work with it. We do a lot of work with studios where they come in and talk to students, do master classes, all that kind of stuff. So I think we've got a very good circle, and we built a pretty good system. And I think we're ranked within the top 10 usually schools. We've got great studios here, partly because I think of Algonquin, but I think it's not just one, pardon me, one thing. It's the whole way everything kind of came together. So it's pretty, been pretty fortunate and pretty lucky. And teaching is a lot of fun. It's pretty awesome. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, out of your 20 plus years career, how has the industry changed, and how do you prepare your students for these changes? Like, especially when it's like, oh, we're gonna go from paper and pencil to like a digital format, or 3D to 2D, or you know what I mean?
yeah. So I grew up working in paper. Um, and I remember seeing some of the first 3D and going, well, I don't know how to, whatever that is. And I mean, there's a lot of people screaming that 3D was the end of, 2D animation and all that kind of stuff. And I've
Mhm.
learned over the years that this, doesn't usually work out to be exactly the same as people fear. Because it wasn't. I mean, it augmented it in some ways and changed, but it didn't kill careers and stuff. Um, I actually did the first um, Photoshop painting for a series we were doing at Lacewood. This was the name of the studio at the time. And based on that Photoshop painting, we managed to convince the guy who owned the studio to go into digital ink and paint, spent like $1 million on SGI graphics machines and software and stuff. And we ran the first, I was told it was the first digital ink and paint in Canada for sure, maybe even North America.
Oh
And it
wow.
was 1980, 1996, 5, 6, something like that. I think we did that. So that was, you see these little transitions and see these things kind of coming in. So we couldn't draw on computers yet. We were still drawing everything on paper and scanning it in. Um, and then when, Flash came along and Toon Boom and stuff, that was another big thing. And it was interesting because, I mean, it had to grow. It wasn't a huge threat in the beginning. It was like, well, this is cool. If they can get everything to come back from the Philippines and Korea and be back in one studio, you can have that kind of control again. And if that can do it, it's not there yet, but it is
Yeah.
now. I mean, it's clearly there now, but it wasn't in the
Mhm.
beginning. Um, and then I just kind of threw myself into that and tried to figure it out. Made friends with Toon Boom and started getting trained. And I still work in studios because that's the only way. I mean, my first day working on I was at Jamfeld and
Yeah.
they gave me a scene and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll just move this, I think. Oh, click on that and move that. And,
Yeah.
it took me 3 days to do a scene that should have taken 10 minutes or something. But, I was fortunate enough to have those opportunities and people let me do that kind of stuff. And I figured it out.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's just good to, keep going with the flow and not to block yourself out from things like that. So I think it's an interesting ride to see that.
Right.
And I think what I've distilled from all that when I'm trying to teach and when we're thinking about how we're teaching at the college, I think like most places too, is when I'm trying to teach a set piece of software, we teach Toon Boom because that's what most of the jobs are. We teach Maya because that's pretty standard for most of the jobs, is
Mhm.
Photoshop, but we don't want to get into, teaching different pieces of software. And we really want to get into, people say animation is like the Walt Disney thing with shaking Tinkerbell on the paper and it comes to life, right? And
Yeah.
it's bringing characters to life, and it is. It's all that great stuff, but it's really problem solving. So if you can apply principles and solve problems, it doesn't matter if you're drawing on paper, if you're moving a rig around, or 20 years from now, if you're doing something like this, Minority Report computer type stuff and moving things around, you're still going to be applying those principles of animation and composition and design. And I think that's the human factor, since we're going to talk about AI.
Yeah, we're getting there. So speaking of AI, have you guys has like the faculty incorporated discussions about AI into the curriculum? And if so, like what have you guys covered? Just curious.
So we're talking about it. We're talking to the studios about it.
Okay.
Um, I personally believe it's not our position in the college to lead in something like this.
Yep.
But we meet with the studios through the college twice a year, and of course, we're all friends and stuff, so we talk and have a beer and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, um, at the moment, I think we're not. We're looking at maybe teaching something that's more of an AI awareness kind of thing, how to use it properly, what's acceptable use of it in the academic terms of you can't hand in something that you've created using an artificial intelligence program and saying it's yours because it's not. And that would be in our world plagiarism, and you wouldn't get the marks for that and all that kind of stuff, which is a little different than studio. Studios have to be able to still prove. My understanding at the moment for most broadcasters is that they own everything that is being put on the screen. So I know that they're using AI for mood boards and developing things and scrounging the internet to get all the information, um, which I think is a great tool. It's like using Chat GPT to check your grammar. You
Yeah.
know, it's not really, or you maybe develop the check marks or checkpoints for your talking points or something, but you still have input. And I think until we get to how it's seeing how it's being used in a studio, um, we're just going to sort of see where what we need to do just to make sure the students are aware of it academically, and then we'll see how it gets implemented. And it'd be interesting to see how it gets implemented because there's all different kinds of takes on it, and fears and hopes and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting, you know.
Yeah, it's a very unique time, I would say.
Yeah,
Because it's like, okay, this thing can do some weird shit and some interesting things, but it's also like, oh, there's some ethical problems here with how it's, sources
a
this
little bit.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a tiny bit.
And now, I mean, you've got Disney that's creating their own virtual AI
Yeah.
using all Disney stuff, and that
Mhm.
takes away some of the ethical question of who owns it. I mean, it comes. I've heard people say, well, the whole thing is going to come down to like Napster and the music world, right? Like they're going to have to give some royalties. I don't know how the formula for that would
Yeah.
work. I guess they're going to have to keep track of what they strip data wise from the internet and stuff and just pay everybody 0.000 or 0.00014 cents every time someone makes an image or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no one's going
Yeah,
to
I've
get
heard.
rich off it. That's for sure.
No, no.
Well,
Like I
no
heard
one
that
who
as well.
created it.
Yeah, I've also heard like they're using AI for like lighting and different stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat, but I don't know how that necessarily works. Like you said, like mood
So
boards and stuff like that.
as a tool, um, I can see like if Toon Boom incorporated AI to make better in betweens. Like,
Mhm.
your hand goes from here straight down to here. It doesn't do an arc and drag.
Right.
I mean, I can see things like that where it makes tools more intuitive or it tries to read what you're doing. But I think there's still going to be some person sitting there, you know,
Right.
adjusting things. Maybe it's going to be more like like the green screen stuff where you've got the balls on the actor and stuff. And if you've ever seen one of those clips, every once in a while there's this huge triangle that goes off into space somewhere, and someone's got to sit there and move it back
Yeah.
into place, and
Yeah. The
even
rogue
then
node that
still
just goes.
adjust. Yeah, and still adjust the animation sometimes. So maybe quotas will go up because animation will be easier, but I
Mhm.
don't think it's an animate button where you just push it and or you're driving to work in your car and going, Siri, I need a TV show for 10-year-old kids, and it's got a bulldog and a cat, and they're in peril, and get it on my desk by the time I get to work,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right?
Yeah. It's not the infamous animate button where it's done. You're like, all right, great. It's still gonna need that human fact.
No.
Oh, even
Oh,
Siri's listening.
Siri's now trying to make a show for me, so
Oh,
sorry.
perfect.
I may be
So,
richer after this.
oh, perfect. Uh, so, what ways do you see AI possibly impacting future job prospects for graduates entering the workforce?
um, yes, I mean they're being impacted right now for sure. with everything slowing down and all the reasons behind that need to get sorted out. Um, so that's, I guess it depends. The bottom line is always money, right? Like, I mean, no matter how a studio feels about their people and how much they love their crew, they can afford what they can afford. And since COVID, it seems that the pressure is on to reduce the amount of budgets, and there's competition from third world countries like there was at the end of the 90s and 80s and stuff. And we're
Mhm.
back to potentially shipping stuff overseas and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So I think that's affecting things. If AI comes along and does take jobs, and I can see that eventually that will be the case and that the number of people required to create a show could be reduced. But I don't think it's ever going to be like Katzenberg numbers where it's gone from, I had 1,000 people made this movie, now I can do it with two, kind of stuff. But um, I think it's going to be something where it's enhanced from what we have at the moment. Just like, now drawing from paper, now we can move things around in color. When we did stuff in paper, you had to kind of figure color is going to slow it down. So you had to kind of animate in your head a little faster. And
Mhm.
then when you saw it in color, you're like, oh, I'm almost, you know. And now you can see it for real right in front of you, and you go, oh, this is how it's going to look. I can change it. That's a great innovation. And I hope that the innovations that come out of something with AI would be productive, not only in reducing the amount of time that it takes, because it's still a long process to make an animated film, but also to help improve the quality and to, you know, keep people working as well. That there needs to be that input, even if it's lessened. But I feel like if, Netflix or whoever, they want advertising dollars, they're going to want more shows. And if you have studios that are halved in their population, in Ottawa at least, generally when a studio went down, two more popped up you know out of the
Yeah.
cliques that were kind of inside, kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
So I can see that happening too, where there's more studios, maybe not employing as many people,
Right.
but still producing content for people that need to show up because they're people are gonna want things faster, you know. So I can see it changing. Um, yeah, but it's gonna. I don't know if it's bad. It's just different. I
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah, that's my thing too. Like that's why I did this. I was like, oh, okay. How do people feel, and what do people think is going to happen versus the reality of what's going to happen,
Hmm.
right? So like I'm the same boat where like I hope it's used as like an intuitive tool, like to make give you better in betweens, or you're still at the helm. It's just you have like essentially a smarter clippy that's helping you guide
Yeah,
you along. Yeah.
like there's jobs that are time consuming and technical.
Yeah.
Rim lighting,
Yeah.
getting some of that on a character is
Mhm.
a difficult task for a composer, a special effects person, or animator, depending on how the studio splits it up to do it. And it takes
Mhm.
time. If something could say there's a light source here, everything's here, and teach it how to do that, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That's not gonna that doesn't impact a compositor's day. They hate that stuff anyway, right? They'd rather
Yeah.
be doing the cool stuff. So
Yeah.
that AI can't do, and I think that maybe isn't a bad thing. That's just I remember reading an article in the it was from the 70s, and computers were just coming into the business workspace, and they were saying that people will be able to do a week's worth of work in a day. Therefore, they're going to have so much time off in the future, 2-day work weeks and all this kind of stuff. And,
Yeah.
you know, we have the same number of people working. They're just doing, a week's worth of work every day for 5 days now. And,
Yeah.
there's also that if studios get more work in at a faster pace, then maybe you can keep the number of people that you have. You're just going through more product faster or something too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, have any of your students brought concerns about AI to you or faculty? And how do you address these concerns or anxieties about, going to workforce that, AI is impacting?
I slap them. No, I just
No.
um No, a few, especially third years,
Okay.
because that's what I'm mostly teaching. But there have been people who have, we've had conversations about it,
Hmm.
um, and it would be scary to think you're getting into an industry that may not exist in 5 years or something. Which I don't have a magic ball, but I don't think that's the case. When I graduated, Disney had made The Black Cauldron.
Oh yeah.
And there'd been the strike, and it looked like animation was just for kids. It was, you know, Disney was over kind of thing. And I thought that was the be all and end all, but it was pretty much the only thing, you know.
Hmm.
Um, there wasn't a lot of other stuff going on, and it looked pretty bleak then too. And we came out of it into all this other stuff. So I think the audiences are sophisticated enough that animation as a storytelling tool has interest and will be around. So it's not gone. 3D hasn't gone. 2D hasn't gone. Like it's still going to
Right.
be there.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of how does that sort of settle. And I think too, if you've got people who i- have to correct work that's been generated within parameters, they need a pretty good eye and they need a pretty good skill set to be able to do that. So I think maybe from an education point of view, we might have to see the level of the talent of the students that are graduating be raised to be able to
Hmm.
enter a studio. It used to be an in-betweener, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you on the street, can you hold a pencil? Come here, kind of stuff. And it's like, sure, I can. I'm not an artist, and people did that. I mean, the stories that people started their animation careers like that, and that's not going to happen anymore. It's like, you know, maybe you're going to need to know how to code for some jobs and stuff like that. So it will be different. Um, but yeah, I think some of them are very nervous about that. And I kind of tell them, at the moment, it seems that everything's in flux,
Right.
um, that it's going to be different. But it's not necessarily going to be, the worst case scenario that everybody hears about or thinks about and all that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be a little bit softer of a landing
Okay.
um, in general, I think. Um,
Right.
but I do think it's going to separate the wheat from the chaff in the sense that for the last 10 years, the animation industry has been booming. And basically anybody that could animate when they graduated got a job. Now that
Right.
wasn't like that before.
Hmm.
um, and I think it may go back to being like that where you have to be in the top 30-50% to even get into a studio. And we may have to look at, eventually we're going to have to teach some kind of AI, probably some skills around that, at least software knowledge kind of thing. If that's, again, it's not our place to lead that. I don't think the studios have to set the pace for that, and we'll work with them in fulfilling that need. If that's an industry need, that's kind of our job, right? And it gives people a chance to find employment. And what we're looking at, our kind of motivation is to get people in the studio with a skill set that once they're in the studio, they can go, you know what, I'm an animator, but I really want to be a storyboard artist. I want to be a character designer. So it's like, well, there's the storyboard people there. Go have a coffee with them. There's the character designer people, go have a coffee with them, go talk to them and that kind of stuff. And that's how they'll get to where they want to get, hopefully.
Yeah.
But they're not going to get there if they're not in the studio. So whatever way to get them into the studio works is, I think, the best way to go about doing it.
Yeah. That's an interesting point of view. Yeah. You like animation as a platform, like a yeah platform to propel them wherever they need to go.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's how a lot of jobs don't make it to the studio sites, and a lot of
Hmm.
internal hires, or hey, I need someone to clean up storyboards for a month because we're behind. Oh, I'll
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of that stuff happens, right? So, but that you're not going to get those jobs if you're not in the studio and aware. So it's important to get in the studio. And yeah, that may be more difficult for the next little while, but that really has nothing to do with AI yet. That's
No.
still all the other stuff. We may
Yeah.
just come out of this in time for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's just that's unfortunate, and hopefully it's not going to be that way.
Yeah, hopefully not. All right, so as we wrap things up, finally, what are some misconceptions about AI and animation that you think are important for your students to know as they enter the industry?
Well, we kind of joked about the animate button, but I think
Yeah,
that's one of them.
yeah.
Um, that they're not going to need to know how to animate because AI is going to do it for them. I think it's actually going to be the opposite. I have a feeling that we're going to have to restructure what we do, maybe even add another year if we have to do something like that, because I think the level of people going into the industry is going to need to be at a higher level than people now. So um, that's to be determined, I think. But I think that's something that's a possibility that is going to happen. I think, I mean, I've at the animation festival, there's a lot of talk about AI and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
um, I think treat it like in my brain, I'm kind of treating it like 3D, right?
Hmm.
Like they are going to take some jobs away from what would have been the traditional animation process or something. And some studios are going to, I mean, there's some kid shows where the backgrounds are basically shapes. And
Yeah.
why not? I mean, if you're a studio, the temptation would be there to be able to do that.
Hmm.
But at the same time, if it's that simple, you're probably only employing one person to
One.
create those. And now that
Yeah.
person is probably overseeing what AI is doing. So,
Right.
hopefully it goes that way.
Hmm.
So I don't know. And if studios do let people go, then hopefully, that do it yourself spirit is still very much alive. And some people just, I mean, I did it because I didn't know any better as out of college. But I mean, smarter people than me will have done it and done very well at it. So,
Yep.
and I think there'll be room for that as well as, content will drive the product, and hopefully there'll be another balance, where you've got 3D, you've got 2D, you've got AI purely generated stuff or whatever. You'll have AI filtering in through other tools. Um, but everything I've heard, I've played around with it a bit, and it's like, oh, type in this. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, can I see that from a slightly different angle? Can I place the camera up here? Can I, if I'm making backgrounds or something, how can I control all that stuff? And that's not quite there from what I know, and I don't know a lot. And I've seen some simple animation done with it, but it's very simple animation done with it,
Yeah.
and that means that it will get better. I mean, but how it grows and how it becomes detrimental or an aid, I think there's always a risk, but I think that the smart money would be on it becoming an aid for animation, and
Hmm.
and then maybe doing something else down the road. But
Right.
and I can see styles of shows being more requiring fewer people because they can do more with less, kind of thing. But you're going to always have those kinds of shows anyway. So,
Right.
but yeah, I think it's going to be different,
Right.
and but it may be a good different. You know, it may get more animation done, nicer animation done. It may be like Chat GPT, where it's like, hey, AI, check my animation. Your arc on the left hand is too flat. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Man, that
So
wouldn't be too bad, yeah. That'd be
that'd be
interesting.
nice. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
fix it.
Faster, come on.
So
Well, perfect. Awesome, Neil. That was a great conversation and very interesting and insightful. Thanks again for doing this.
my pleasure. Nice talking to you.
Thanks, Neil. All right, there we go. Another one in the books. I want to thank our guests for contributing on the subject of AI and animation, and hopefully you get something out of it. Here's hoping the more conversations we have, the more clearer the future will become. And hopefully, the more we talk, the less we demystify AI and show the realities of it. But again, no one has a crystal ball, so that can all change in a matter of seconds. But all we can do is hopefully shape the future that we want. Check in for our next episode. Until then, let's keep the conversation going. See you next time.